Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November Live. Oh, I gotta stay here for the light. I hope everyone's having an amazing day. I'm gonna give you a few minutes to filter in, see if anyone joins us while I check and make sure I'm really live, because sometimes, you think you're live and then you click over to Facebook on your phone and you're not sure if you're live. It says I'm live. Let's see. Live. Oh, because sometimes. Okay, turn it off on my phone. So I hope everyone's having an amazing day. I'm doing excellent. I found out that in Kosovo, we now have kombucha, which I didn't know that we had until today. And I'm so excited about it because I think like a year and a half ago, I even told one of my friends, if we get kombucha, Kosovo's made in the sun. Like, I will stay in Kosovo. Life will be great. And, I really do love Kosovo. So it's great. For those that don't know, I came to Kosovo first as a Peace Corps volunteer. And now I work at one of the colleges here in Kosovo. And it's the perfect place to have my business. So I really love it. If you didn't know, it's in Eastern Europe. The weather right now is still pretty good. We don't have any snow. It's not too rainy. Like, it just gets dark at 4:30, which I guess is something that happens in the rest of the US too. I'm just from Arizona originally, and it doesn't really, I guess maybe it does get dark. I haven't lived in Arizona in 3 years, just about. So anywho, back to our regularly scheduled programming instead of me just chit-chatting away with everyone. I wanted to mention this quote because today's speech it's on Julie Burnstien's Tedtalk that's about the 4 lessons in creativity. And there's this really great creativity quote that I love. So it's Robert Greene, and he defines creativity as a combination of discipline and childlike spirit. And I feel like that is so true in creativity and in the creativity that it takes to become a speaker, because you have to be disciplined. You have to turn on your Facebook Live and get on here and start speaking away to your audience. You've got to push yourself, and it takes discipline to keep trying time and time again, because no one gives a good speech the first time they jump on. So it does take a little bit of time and discipline. And I love that he reminds us to have a childlike spirit, to keep trying and laugh about it, make some jokes, don't take it so serious. There's, nothing bad has ever happened from someone giving a speech, and, well, I take that back. But nothing bad has ever come from trying to give a speech. I will say that. You can fight me on it. I can come up with a bunch of examples now that I said it. Mostly politicians that have given speeches and things have gone terribly wrong. But I don't want to dissuade you from speaking, because I really do believe that one speech can change the world. And maybe it's your speech, and the audience is out there waiting for you to give it. So today I'm going to walk you through Julie's speech using my strategy, structure, and style framework. It's what I use every month when I jump on and do these master classes, because they're so fun. And I love breaking down speeches and showing you practical steps that you can do to take your speech to the next level. But 2 things before we get started. The first is every masterclass, I put together a workbook that you can download from the link above. I love that I can just point up here. And the link's in my bio. You jump on my mailing list so you'll know next month when I do one of these, and get my blog that I publish every week, and all of that good stuff. And the second thing I wanted to mention before we dive into the heart of the masterclass today is that right now I'm holding free strategy workshops or strategy calls that are called Aha, That's My Speech, because during the call with me, you'll have your aha moment. I've already had a couple people take me up on the free strategy call, and they've been so much fun to hear the potential and hear all of the ideas that people have for the types of speeches that they want to give. And I know that each and every one of you watching this has an amazing speech inside of you, just waiting for your audience. So I really hope you take me up on it. You can see the link also up here underneath the other link to get your free workbook. So during the call, it's 30 minutes of you and me figuring out what your speech topic is and what that special message is that only you can share with your audience. So I really hope that you sign up for one and that we get to chat soon. So without further ado, let me switch slides. That's why I love the software. And talk to you a little bit about my framework of strategy, structure, and style. So first is strategy, and that's going to be all about your overall approach to the speech. So what's the speech occasion? Where are you giving it? Who's in your audience? What do they think about your speech topic? Are they into it, or do you need to persuade them to be into it a little bit more? All those things go into the strategy, as well as what type of rhetorical devices you might use. The second part is structure. And structure, as you might guess, is how it's designed. So you have to put a little bit of forethought into what your speech is going to look like. So for instance, this webinar, I structure it in 3 parts. It's the 3 parts of speaking, where first we talk about strategy, then we talk about structure, and then we talk about style. And under each of these, I have a couple bullet points that we walk through, and every month I do it the same way. And so this is something you can put into practice right now, is actually structuring your Facebook Lives that you do, Instagram TV if you're on there. When you actually do live speaking occasions, make sure that you have an underlying structure and logic to your speech. And the third point that we talk about is all about style. And that's that special little spice that you put into it, what you do that makes your speech the speech that only you can give, right? Because all of us can structure the same, have a similar structure. I'm looking at my chakra banners. So all of us could have a speech where we talk about the 7 chakras, but what are you going to share and how you share it is what makes it uniquely yours. And that's where the style part comes in. So now let's dive over, now that we know what the outline is for today's webinar, dive over into strategy. So what do you need to know about Julie's strategy before we actually go over and watch her speech? The first thing is that this is an informative speech by a speaker who wants to share knowledge that their audience will find interesting or novel. So all informative speeches do this. So you always want to pick some topic that either your audience really wants to know more about or that they're going to find new and interesting or novel in some way. And so a lot of people pick really boring informative speech topics sometimes. I think we all, I'm still a college professor, so some days I feel like I'm giving really boring lectures, trying to add some spice in there. But I think we can all think of speeches that we've seen in the past where it's just been something we already knew, right? It's not something unique or special or where we're like, oh, I knew this. Like, I learned something new by coming and watching this or watching that speech on YouTube, and you're like, been there, done that. And this also applies for when you want to do a live on Facebook or Instagram Live. You want to do something new, interesting, or novel to keep your audience engaged. The other thing that Julie does really well is she uses other people's stories throughout her speech. So in a moment when we talk about how she structures her speeches, you'll see how she weaves them in. But this was a very strategic use of her time on the stage and something that takes a lot of planning in advance. So it's definitely something you could do and strategize about beforehand. But you want to, use it effectively and think through it before you get started. So the other thing that we're going to actually watch now and that she does genius strategy-wise is connecting her introduction to her conclusion. So it's something that you definitely have to plan. Only, I think, very experienced speakers can speak off the cuff and connect what they began their speech with what they ended it with without planning it ahead of time. But it's a great rhetorical device to use, and a great way to make your audience feel that feeling of completion that you want at the end of a speech. So let's click over, and I'm going to show you how she does her introduction, and I'm going to stop it a little bit, and then I'll show you her conclusion so you can see exactly what she does to connect her introduction and her conclusion. So let me come over here and we will watch away.
On my desk in my office, I keep a small clay pot that I made in college. It's raku, which is a kind of pottery that began in Japan centuries ago as a way of making bowls for the Japanese tea ceremony. This one is more than 400 years old. Each one was pinched or carved out of a ball of clay, and it was the imperfections that people cherished. Everyday pots like this cup take 8 to 10 hours to fire. I just took this out of the kiln last week, and the kiln itself takes another day or two to cool down. But raku is really fast. You do it outside, and you take the kiln up to temperature in 15 minutes. It goes to 1500 degrees. And as soon as you see that the glaze has melted inside, you can see that faint sheen. You turn the kiln off, and you reach in with these long metal tongs. You grab the pot, and in Japan, this red hot pot would be immediately immersed in a solution of green tea. And you can imagine what that steam would smell like. But here in the United States, we ramp up the drama a little bit, and we drop our pots into sawdust, which catches on fire, and you take a garbage pail and you put it on top, and smoke starts pouring out. I would come home with my clothes reeking of wood smoke. I love raku because it allows me to...
So I wanted to stop it there and just point out the descriptive words that she's using, right? She's talking about her clothes reeking, and she's being so descriptive and talking through the step-by-step process. And this is like harkening back to what I was saying about informative speaking, where you want something that's going to be interesting for your audience and novel. I don't know about you, but until she started talking about raku, I don't really know that I knew what it was. I don't think so. Like maybe I had seen some pots in a museum before, but I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. And then she walks you through step by step and tells you about her experience with it. So 10 out of 10.
Play with the elements. I can shape a pot out of clay and choose a glaze, but then I have to let it go to the fire and the smoke. And what's wonderful is the surprises that happen, like this crackle pattern, because it's really stressful on these pots. They go from 1500 degrees to room temperature in the space of just a minute. Raku is a wonderful metaphor for the process of creativity.
So let me stop it here too and highlight this. So her whole introduction is set up as this metaphor for the process of creativity and talking. That's why she went through step by step and by step to show you the descriptive language and process behind how raku's made. So she can set up this beautiful metaphor that she's going to use then in her conclusion about what the process of creativity is, and harkening back then to the title of her speech, the 4 lessons in creativity. So let's keep watching her introduction for just a couple more minutes.
I find in so many things that tension between what I can control and what I have to let go happens all the time, whether I'm creating a new radio show or just at home negotiating with my teenage sons. When I sat down to write a book about creativity, I realized that the steps were reversed. I had to let go at the very beginning, and I had to immerse myself in the stories of hundreds of artists and writers and musicians and filmmakers. And as I listened to these stories, I realized that creativity grows out of everyday experiences more often than you might think, including letting go.
I love that the cup doesn't break. And I love that she was willing to break a cup that she was just talking about how she made. I'll bring this back up later when we talk about the style, but I just wanted to pause it for a second since we just watched it.
Supposed to break, but that's okay. That's part of the letting go, is sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. Because creativity also grows from the broken places.
And so that was her beautiful thesis statement, that creativity also grows from the broken places. She set it up so well in her introduction, because she introduced us to this broad topic after having this amazing attention getter that was so descriptive of the Rakae process. So attention getter introduces us to the topic, connected with the audience by talking about her son some, and then delivers a great thesis statement. So now I'm going to fast forward to the end, and I think it was right at about 5 or 15:30. So we can see how she wraps it up. And then we'll go back when we talk about the structure to watch her first point.
Which has got me thinking about my work and where the creativity is there. And I'm not an artist. He's right. We all wrestle with experience and challenge, limits and loss. Creativity is essential to all of us, whether we're scientists or teachers, parents or entrepreneurs. I want to leave you with another image of a Japanese tea bowl. This one is at the Freer.
I want to pause because I started it a little bit before her conclusion, but she does this beautiful transition of saying, in conclusion, here's what I'm going to talk about. And I feel like people don't do this often enough, and it's something I really work with my clients on, is making sure that you have a marker to your conclusion so your audience knows that you're actually concluding now and not bringing up another point or continuing another story. It's so great to have these signs and transitions to let your audience know what's happening.
Gallery in Washington, D.C. It's more than 100 years old, and you can still see the finger marks where the potter pinched it. But as you can also see, this one did break at some point in its 100 years. But the person who put it back together, instead of hiding the cracks, decided to emphasize them, using gold lacquer to repair it. This bowl is more beautiful now, having been broken, than it was when it was first made. And we can look at those cracks because they tell the story that we all live, of the cycle of creation and destruction, of control and letting go, of picking up the pieces and making something new. Thank you.
Oh, it gives me chills at the end because she just does it such a great job. And so she continues this metaphor that she started in the introduction and brings it all back together in the conclusion to show the pot. And then with the gold liqueur, she is able to summarize her entire speech with that last sentence by saying each of her 4 points and what they have to do with the cycle of creation and destruction. And I just think it's so cool. And I love that she created that metaphor so I can show it all to you as something that you can do in your next speech. And I just love everything about it. So to recap really quick, the 3 things we talked about was strategy this week, which is like the overall approach to the speech, is first what we use informative speeches for, which is to share new, interesting, and novel information. Second, we talked about how she uses other people's stories, which we'll see an example of in a moment. And finally, this connecting the introduction and conclusion through the use of a metaphor. And so I want to challenge you as you're planning your next informative speech to think about, is there a metaphor that encapsulates what you're trying to express to your audience? And can you take it a step further and use Julie's speech as inspiration to also use a metaphor in your introduction and tie it into your conclusion, because it's just so beautiful when it's done. So now let's talk about the structure part of an informative speech. So like any speech, you're always going to have an introduction, body, and conclusion with some transitions sprinkled throughout. The other day I was talking to a client, and I think I also shared it with my class. I've been stuck on the sandwich metaphor, maybe because I've been watching Julie's speech a bunch, listening to metaphors. But I like to think of a speech as a sandwich. So you have the top layer, the top part of the bread. That's the word I was looking for. Bread is what we use to make sandwiches. So you have the top piece of bread that is your introduction, and then you have the bottom piece that's your conclusion, and then all the yummy stuff in between. The whole body of your speech is the meat, the cheese, the veggies, all of that. And then you have transitions, that's like the sauce that holds it all together. And so every speech has these three main parts. And it's so fun to share them with you. So what we're going to do now is let me actually show you the structure of how she did her main points, because it's really cool, and then we'll watch it and come back. So first is she's going to have a topic sentence. She's going to have that introduction to each of her lessons of creativity. And what I love about how she structured this speech, and that you can see really a lot more clearly, but we'll talk through it here too, but a lot more clearly in the workbook that you can download in the link above, is how it's laid out step by step. And she does the same thing for each of her main points, for each of her lessons of creativity. And she really doesn't need to vary them, because she doesn't need to vary the structure, and it's so easy for the audience to keep in mind. So she's always going to first introduce the creativity lesson that she's talking about. And then what she's going to do is support that lesson with a story that she pre-recorded. And so she interviews 4 different artists. She plays a piece of the interviews that she did while she was writing her book. And she lets us hear in the artist's own words what that lesson of creativity looks like. And then she's going to recap. And she does recap so beautifully, as well as sharing metaphors. And she's going to recap and show very clearly how that story is connected to the lesson that she said in her topic sentence. And then she's going to transition to her next part. Some parts she does a really good transition to, like, I think between her first lesson and her second lesson, she does a good transition, but between like the second and third and the third and fourth, they could be a little stronger, but you know, it's all good. So let me come back over here to this slide. Oh, actually, we'll come back to this slide. How's that one look? There we go. And back up to the end of her introduction and watch the first point.
And so I want to tell you a story about work and play, and about 4 aspects of life that we need to embrace in order for our own creativity to flourish. The first embrace is something that we think, oh, this is very easy, but it's actually getting harder, and that's paying attention to the world around us. So I'm going to stop it there. That is a great topic sentence. And you see how clear it is? She didn't try and hide it. It's no mystery what the first lesson is. It's that we need to pay attention to the world around us. And I love that she makes that roadmap for her audience. And that is such a structured thing to do. And it's why I bring it up here. It's because you want to show the audience how your points are connected. You don't need to make it a mystery. Many artists speak about needing to be open, to embrace experience. And that's hard to do when you have a lighted rectangle in your pocket that takes all of your focus. The filmmaker Meera Nair speaks about growing up in a small town in India. Its name is Bhubaneswar, and here's a picture of one of the temples in her town.
In this little town, there were like 2,000 temples. We played cricket all the time. We kind of grew up in the rubble. The major thing that inspired me, that led me on this path that made me a filmmaker eventually was traveling folk theater that would come through the town. And I would go off and see this great battles of good and evil by two people in a school field with no props, but with a lot of passion and hashish as well. And it was amazing. The folk tales of Mahabharata and Ramayana, the two holy books, the epics that everything comes out of in India, they say. After seeing that Jatra, the folk theater, I knew I wanted to get on, and perform.
Isn't that a wonderful story? You can see the sort of break in the everyday. There they are on the school field, but it's good and evil and passion and hashish. And Mira Nair was a young girl with thousands of other people watching this performance, but she was ready. She was ready to open up to what it sparked in her. And it led her, as she said, down this path to become an award-winning filmmaker.
And so that is how she connected the story back to her main point. And let's see if she does one more sentence. And
so being open for that experience that might change you is the first thing we need to embrace.
And then I say, I don't remember if she did it. Of course she did it, because she's so freaking good at doing transitions. And so she says, this is the first thing we need to embrace if we're going to be more creative, is we have to open our eyes and be part and look around us and see what we can see. And so it's so great. And let's play a little bit more.
Artists also speak about how some of their most powerful work comes out of the parts of life that are most difficult.
And so that's how she starts to transition to her second point, that's actually all about the parts of life that are most difficult. And then she does something similar for her third and fourth points. The third one, just so in case you didn't have time, I would hate for you to miss them. The third one is that the pushing the limits of what we can do and always taking things a step farther than what we think we're capable of. And then the fourth one, she shares this beautiful story about a photographer that captured pictures of the fallen World Trade Center and the cleanup process and all of that. And so the creativity lesson is standing in the space between what we see in the world and what we hope for. And I think that is such a beautiful message about creativity, and it's why this is one of my favorite talks, because these 4 lessons of creativity are also something that we can apply as we start to take our speaking to the next level and become more and more comfortable with it. So just to recap what her structure was, is she has her 4 main points. Each one is about one of her creativity lessons that she comes up with. And then she says what the lesson is, supports it with a story, recaps how it connects the lesson and the story, and then transitions to the next point. And it's as easy as that. And I really encourage you to watch the whole speech so you can see how she does it time and time again. And so we've watched one of her main points. We've talked about the introduction and the conclusion already. So now it's time for us to transition over and talk about her style and what she's up to. So first, I want to so commend her for just going with the flow. And it's really a lesson and something you can take away, because let me tell you, after doing these lives so many times, nothing ever goes according to plan. You think you have everything under control. You're like, of course I'm going to drop this cup. Oh, yeah, drop this cup, and it's going to break into a bunch of pieces on the stage and make my metaphor even more memorable. And then the cup doesn't break. And you're there and you just have to roll with it. And so the same thing happens on these lives. Sometimes, I get on here and I think, oh, I got this. Everything's going to be great. Or I have my notes ready ahead of time, and then I forget to print them, and my iPad's not charged, or any number of things. So you just have to roll with the punches. And I love that that's what she does in the speech. And that is really what I think her style is in life, is, you just keep going, keep pushing it, and she recovers so well after the cup doesn't break, and it's great. So the second thing about her style, which I also so connect to, is her hand movements. I'm actually going to click back over here and show you over at the beginning when they don't even like look at her hands that much for it, because see how she has them steepled there? That's what she's doing through the majority of her speech. I was going to scroll down, but I have the same problem when I'm speaking. And so I so relate, because it's like you're either going to be too stiff with your hands and, you know, keep them straight like this, like Angela Merkel does, or President Obama used to do this thumb thing because pointing's too aggressive. So you just do this, oh, I'm going to make my point like this. You really have to practice your hand movements so they communicate what you want them to communicate. I tend to either hold them really close, and then I started overcompensating. So now I like wiggle them around and make all these gestures all the time as I'm doing these lives, and I'm like, I rewatch them, and it's something I would like to work on, is keeping, you know, my shoulders straight and not having crazy hand movements. But we're always all a work in progress, and you'll notice as you start to do more speaking that there's always something you want to change. I recorded a video the other week for the college I work at. It's like a promotional video, and you just have to take a deep breath and let it go. Which was one of her lessons. But really try not to have stiff hand movements. It separates you from your audience. I'd rather have overdone hand movements, I think, than have a very stiff, like straight back style, because that's just who I am. It's my style. I like being more animated. So that was my second thing about her style. And then to transition to the third one, see what I did there, is that she's barely connecting her speech to herself, right? Like, do you know anything more about her after you watch this? You know, she has a son, you know that she wrote this book on creativity and that she does Rakae. So maybe there's some stuff there, but I like to go a little bit deeper. When I give a speech or when I'm coaching my clients on their speeches, and share more information about yourself, give the audience more to connect with. So I wish she would have talked about how she's used these lessons of creativity in her own life. And towards the end, she uses a quote again of someone else and how they connected with this speech because they didn't see themselves as an artist. And wow, all of us can be creative and be artists, which cool. However, wouldn't it have been a little bit, taking it even a notch higher if she had shared with us about her own creativity and like creative process or applying the lessons to her life? So those were the three things I had for style. And just to start to conclude and wrap up this live masterclass that we're doing today, I've got hair everywhere from demonstrating my crazy hand movements. I wanted to conclude today by sharing the three things that I think Julie does well and the three things I think she could get better at. So 3 things she does well, like we were just talking about with style, is she really goes with the flow. No matter what happened in her speech, when her cup didn't break, she just kept going, which is a great lesson for all of us. And I think we can just remember to roll with the punches. She also has such great recap sentences throughout. So this is a structural thing that she does well, is creating these moments of reflection and to recap throughout her speech so her audience can follow along. And finally, you know, I loved it so much in the strategy section, connecting her introduction and her conclusion through that metaphor. Like, I just think it's genius. I would love it if someone did it that watches this webinar and records their metaphor that connects their introduction and conclusion and sends it to me. It would make me so happy in the world. So now that I recap the 3 things she does well, let me get back on track and talk about the 3 things she could improve. So first, hand movements. You don't want to be super stiff. You want to be a little more animated, part of going with the flow, you know, dance along. The second one is some of these stronger transitions. So while she does do a good recap, she could have more clearly, and you'll see it when you download the workbook that's above. One last promotion for it. Don't forget to get your workbook. Is in the second, third, and fourth points. She doesn't really say that those are her second, third, and fourth points. So she has that beautiful my first lesson, the first lesson I learned in creativity from interviewing artists. And then she talks about it. And if you're going to do that sort of numerical marker, it's really good to keep it going throughout your speech. And then the third thing that she could have done better is another style thing, which is style/strategy, is connecting it more to herself and sharing more about herself with her audience so they know a bit more about who she is and what she does. So thank you so much for sticking with me to the end. It is my pleasure to do these masterclasses every month and share with you the strategy, structure, and style. That's like try and say the tongue twister 3 times fast. Style, strategy, structure. Whew, it's a lot. But it's my pleasure to share them with you every month and do a new TED Talk each time. At the beginning of the webinar today, I talked about my new that's my speech strategy session. It's a one-on-one call with me that's totally free for 30 minutes to talk through what your speech could be. I aim to have that aha moment while we're doing while we're having the call, and to really help you find what speech you're here to share with the world. Because like I said at the beginning, I do believe that one speech can change the world. And I think that your speech could be the one that changes the world for someone in your audience. And so I so want to help you get there. Feel free to schedule your call whenever you have time, and we will chit chat all about it. The other thing, if you're stuck around this long, is I wanted to tell you about my Black Friday offer. Sneak peek. We've got a few more days until it gets released, but it's actually going to be all about going live on Facebook, and it'll be you and me for 60 minutes developing nine live that you can do on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you want them. I'll actually show you 3 live structures that you can use, and then we'll talk through some strategy and style on the calls too. So thank you all so much for joining me. My name's Megan Rakae Fisk, and I hope to chat with you soon.